go ahead and just introduce you to the Stewardship Network and to this monthly webcast. As you all know, I'm Lisa Brush with the Stewardship Network. Really pleased to be with you each and every second Wednesday of the month for the last like 15 years or something. And really pleased to be here with Cassandra Ferrera from Green Key Real Estate and the Land Bridge project that she's working on. As you know, the Stewardship Network, our mission is to connect, equip, and mobilize people and organizations to care for land and water in their communities. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we are kind of the capacity builders, providing you all with the backbone support to stay out in the world, caring for land and water in your communities. So thank you all for the work that you do. As you all know, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. Many of you who are longtime returning Stewardship Network webcast attendees will know that. And then if you're new to the Stewardship Network's monthly webcast, welcome. So thank you. As you know, in the Stewardship Network, the name of the game is all about partnerships and collaboratives. We work with all volunteer NGOs to municipal, state, federal, tribal governments, to private contractors and consultants, to private property owners, to volunteers, to funders. So you name it. If you are caring for land and water, we are working with you out in your community. So thank you for the work that you do. We have our geographically place-based member communities that are made up, again, of all of the people and organizations that care for land and water in their communities. And they do on-the-ground collaborative stewardship, as well as learning and engagement workshops and networking activities. So if you are in one of those communities, welcome. And if you are interested in being part of one of your local communities, encourage you to reach out. We bring you all together in person or virtually once a year with a broad representation, and at our annual conference that happens in January. And we will be virtual again this year for our 15th anniversary edition. When we held the first event 15 years ago, I was the only person working at the Stewardship Network, and we wondered how many people would show up and what that event would be. And it has become a beloved event where we really are able to bring an amazing community of people together. People share stories of how they got their job at that event, or how they met people. So we're bringing back our keynotes from the last 15 years. So they will be joining us and delivering, we're asking them to reflect on kind of 15 years ago and 15 years ahead. And then as Cassandra and I will be talking about, what is the 100, 200 years ahead in this work that we do. So I encourage you to go to stewardshipnetwork.org/conference and learn more about it and register. Ask us any questions that you have about it. And with that, I want to again say welcome to you all. I'm Lisa with the Stewardship Network. Really pleased to be here with Cassandra, and really pleased to be here with all of you. And Lynn, great to have you here with the Institute of Environmental Sustainability at Western Michigan, and Brent from the city of Grand Rapids. Mark, saying many years, right? Woohoo! And I remember the days that we used to go over to Eram and do these webcasts from there and watch as a group. So many, many thanks to all of you all who are part of this work. Cassandra, with that, I want to encourage you all to ask any questions that come up. Again, super interesting conversation that Cassandra and I have been having for the last several months. And one of the things that I said is, let's let some other people in on this conversation, because this is really such a great way of thinking about our relationship with the land. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cassandra, let her share her screen. And as she does that, again, encourage you all to go ahead and share with everyone. Go ahead and remember, when you're sending your chat, share it with everyone. And share any questions, thoughts that you have about this conversation that we'll have. So thanks, Cassandra, for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. As Lisa came into the Zoom room before the talk started, I thought, oh gosh, this is really just a continuation of the conversation that we're having. And now there's all these other people in the room that I have yet to meet, and it seems like well. So I just really feel grateful and honored to be invited into your space that you all have cultivated. And I feel like I'm amongst fellow land loving allies. And even if I don't know you, the land is really bringing us together. And it kind of feels like you have a big oak tree like the one in this photo, and you get this really beautiful root system of all this work that you all are doing. So thank you, and thanks for having me. I come to this work as a real estate agent, and I definitely wasn't one of those people who thought, oh, that's a great idea, I should go in there and make a bunch of money, sell and transact the earth. That was not my path. I never actually believed that we should be owning the earth. I was befuddled by the misconception of reality of private property for most of my life. And then when I was guided actually in my prayer practice to go into the field of real estate, I was definitely a little confused, but that was a long time ago, and I had the chutzpah of my early 30s, and I'm really glad that I stuck with it, because the opportunity to get in there and understand how we're transitioning, and the transitioning, whether it's a small, small single family dwelling all the way to huge 1,000-acre parcels of land. It's really it's been a feels like I'm in the belly of the beast, because I do feel that just ethically for me, the capitalization of the earth is a continued sort of, like, again, misguided aspect of colonialism. And so it's been quite a journey. I have, as you can tell, I'm an earth lover. I have a sacred practice, and I also live in community. So this photo is actually the grove and the mugwort here. I live in community with 20 plus other humans, and also my non-human, more than human allies that feel like that grounds our work together. As a real estate agent, I always try to bend my practice towards cooperative stewardship. And so I served communities, retreat centers. I got really interested in the community land trust movement as a way to bring access to folks who didn't have access to land and secure relationship with place. And I also have developed a very strong consulting practice. And all of that, you'll see, has been leading to what I'll share with you today, which is forming a nonprofit called Landbridge, and giving an opportunity for us to rethink and create new patterns of practice relative to land transitions, and giving folks who are already in real estate, or who might come into real estate, an opportunity to be the threshold people that we need to be right now, where we need to interface with the institutions and industries that we're inheriting, and then also threshold ourselves into this future that we're still imagining, and to kind of walk in both worlds. So without further ado, I'll dive into these slides. And I just really want to thank probably many of you, but the teachers and elders that have informed my work over the years. And a further disclaimer, oops. I am a white Euro-descended queer woman living in the unceded territories of the coastal Miwok and Southern Pomo. And I already shared with you about my real estate practice, and I do live and learn in the awkward in-between spaces. And I really am committed to equitable land projects, and always welcome feedback. So one of the things in Landbridge we're really considering is, what is the role of real estate and real estate agents in the land justice movement? In our current legal fiction, which I think is an important piece for us to get, that's what this is somebody made up private property, and not somebody, but a bunch of somebodies, and the culture over time, this misconceived perception of reality in which our land is privately owned, a property, asset, commodity, and it's transacted, it's sold as an object, and the ethics are regulated by the industry and also the state and federal governments that are upholding these practices. And the question, let me a moment here, hold on. There we go. How we build a bridge to the future in which the land is listened to. The land is commonly held and regarded as sacred, unownable, stewarded in trust, and land transitions are supported by facilitators rather than sales agents. Our ethics rooted in values of liberation, repair, cooperation, and kinship. We create accountability to the future, even more so than the bottom line. One of the ways that we're sort of thinking about this is that the land is holding all of our stories. and it goes far back into the past and far into the future, and the land is like our body. It just holds all the stories of experience. And maybe one way of looking at it is that there's these deep story layers in the land where there's indigenous kinship in the land and in all of our, of course, ancestral histories, and that we've all been going through this time for however long we want to track it, of where we're territorial and we're fighting over land and taking land and then owning it and hoarding it. And then hopefully we are here in the intersection of a new story where we're learning how to hold land in common, do cooperative stewardship projects of all the kinds that you all are involved in, rematriation, and all sorts of other ingenious alternatives. So we're really asking ourselves, one of my favorite attorneys, Janelle Orsi, says to me that we can't think about how we're holding the land and the legal structures just based on the past, that our legal imaginations have been limited, that it's really about reimagining and almost like science fiction, like coming from a more imaginative idea of the future to design our way into the iterations on trusts that we need to create now. And it's up to us to, of course, write that next chapter. But here we are in a world in which the basic relationships of real estate uphold a language and a way of thinking in which we have sellers and owners, and they transact real estate in a sales that they pay a commission to all the agents, including the buyer's agent. This is how it is in most states. And we have land as a property, as an object that's going through this as a gross simplification, but it definitely is a basic structure of how we're doing this. And of course, these agents are buffering relationships between people. And just saying, when we objectify the land, we also objectify ourselves, and it can be very challenging for us to think about what is our right relationship. If we're not buyers and sellers, and we're not sales agents, and we're not playing these roles, who are we? What is our right relationship with land? One of the ways we're reimagining it right now, we're like, let's work with the language, because we need to rethink this. What if sellers and owners are currently title holders, and the land is going through a transition, and there's a reunion happening? Often in the land justice movement, there's a reunion happening for people who generationally haven't had access. And in an indigenous context, we're working with this rematriation of the land, the remothering itself. And the facilitation of these transitions can be supported by folks who are not acting as sales agents being paid a commission, but as facilitators. And the land, instead of being that property down at the base of my last slide, actually is everything. We're all inside the land, and it's all of our place of home and belonging. So we're having a threshold moment, I like to say. And of course, that plays into real estate just so well. So I've been working more and more with Native communities and BIPOC groups and now we're seeing these patterns where, because the statistics are of course there, that most title holders are often white folks, and it doesn't mean they're bad people, but we have a gross imbalance of land access. And so we're working primarily with, like I said, BIPOC and Native groups. And so there's ways in which the current real estate setup can actually work for the situation, because when there's not deep healing and trauma-informed relationship and a bunch of mediation and a bunch of time, sometimes we can use the real estate process to really take care of the people. And what we in Landbridge, we use this word strategic positionality. So we're coming in and being able to be in solidarity with our clients and kind of buffer some of the inherent racisms, and unfortunately some of the less educated experiences of people in the industry, and sometimes the sellers and themselves. So it's an interesting time in there. And this is a project that we recently worked with called the Shelterwood Collective, and it was a BIPOC reunion project. One of their folks called it that we had paying full price on the market was paying ransom to liberate the land and reunite it with the folks. And we did spend a lot of time trying to work on a reparations transfer, but we ended up just going on the real estate market and paying full price in a competitive situation for this project. This is in Cazadero in Northern California. And down at the bottom here, I explained that we made progress on a new real estate model in which this group was really wanted to work with us with moving from a sales to a service. We consider that a decolonizing practice of real estate. And so we did 100% transparent accounting of the commission, and they did have a budget for us. So it was amazing. They paid us hourly as facilitators. And then at the end of this big, long 6.5-month process and a really big escrow and big money, we did that accounting, and we were able to pay them back for everything that they had paid us in the process. And then we were also able to flush forward $34,000 additional dollars to their project, which would have come to the agents as commission. So I'm kind of big on decommissioning the commission. and so I feel that agents having to work for commission can distort relationships. And I'm guessing that a lot of you, maybe in your trust, your various trust situations, have real estate agents that are able to work on salary, that they're not working for commission. But maybe we can talk about that. But I do think that commission in the industry upholds the relationship to land as commodity. I think we still need real estate agents, though. We still need professionals who understand the deep complexity of these land transitions and can hold and give relationship support inside of these processes that require a lot of expertise and and situational knowledge. And so so with LandBridge, we're working with this proposition that we work as facilitators through the nonprofit and can serve land justice projects and train other real estate professionals to do so as well. And I already shared about the distributed accounting of the commission. One of the ways that we're also reframing real estate is just to look at it as these different thresholds in which the land is really involved, that the land calls us into relationship. It's not just we who are seeking to go buy something. The land is calling us into relationship, and we respond by getting grounded and researching our options and learning about the site and gathering a team. And then we go to make an offer, that it's not just a legal document transmitted via DocuSign through technical channels, that there's an opportunity to make an offering to the land as well, and to understand that this is a sacred contracting process that we're in, and that during that time that we're doing the escrow and the diligence and all of the contingency work, that there's a contraction working on us and bringing us back into sacred relationship with the land, and that the close of escrow is actually a reunion and the beginning of the next chapter. This is our orientation for LandBridge, for the organization that we're starting. In the North, it's really about keeping our North Pole, like our North Star, oriented towards listening to the land and convening with other land organizations that have this challenge that we have of not just shifting legal structures, but actually shifting our relationship as people and of place. And so in the East, we're working with training, sharing the land stories like Shelterwood and other ones, but also reframing real estate narratives and training real estate agents to do work in this way. In the South, it's the work of doing the real estate transitions. And so that's a big demand right now. And that's a lot of the frontline work that I do. In the West, we see a great need for what we're calling restorative R&D, and that we need to really seek to answer the questions of into what do we transition the land. And I'm super curious about about all of your thinking on that, and governed by who. And another big question I have is, don't we need better training programs for, quote, board of directors for folks who are really deep in the decolonization work and the and to help us take that question deeper of like what qualities help us be intergenerational land stewards of unownable land for the commons. This is just a little bit more context. We see in the North a deep need, of course, for Indigenous wisdom keepers to be helping to guide that work of how we listen to the land. In the East, we see that education being for everybody curious about land justice, return, and ethical land transitions, but of course, specifically real estate folks. In the South, right now, our work does center BIPOC and Native community land returns. And in the West, we see that restorative R&D can really be funded by those who come into this life with excess land and wealth, and who really ask themselves the big questions of how do we do the into what and governed by who, but from a good way of being able to resource that that need for us to develop new legal iterations for holding land. Oops. Second to last slide. Some ideas for creative reroutings. I put this one in here just because I didn't know exactly who y'all were out there. But one of the pieces we're working with is moving from boilerplate contracts to narrative contracts. So contracts that tell the story of who we are as people and our relationship with the land, and include the legal clauses that need to be included. I already spoke to when you make an offer, make an offering. Knowing that when we're getting involved in a land project, and I think that you all know this so well, is that there's layers and layers of stories to the land, and understanding what is our relationship in this great continuum of time. I'm as you can see, I'm totally out of the closet as somebody with a prayer practice, sacred land, listening to the land, sitting, making offerings to trees, listening to trees. I feel like this is like needs to be part of the conversation. And hopefully we can find a way to do that well. And then of course, when you're making a land transition, exploring if you can do this work of decommissioning the commission and working with folks as facilitators rather than agents. And my last slide, back to the grove and the mugwort in the early spring. What if we all had nowhere to go but down and into the land beneath our feet? And what stories would we find there? Who would we be sharing them with? And what would our responsibility be to these relationships? Thank you.
Yeah, Cassandra, thank you. No, it's, and Mitch, I'm going to call you out from, Mitch presented last month on stories of the understory and overstory. And, you know, really, Mitch, what you shared was really those land transitions, right? So you could have talked about them as the ownership transitions, but you really talked about them as the transitions from, you know, kind of what the land used to look like and what it was, to the kind of work that we do in stewarding that work. And Cassandra, I wonder if you can talk just a little bit more about some of those, you know, decommissioning the commission. I put in the chat, like I said, how many of you all in Land Trust Conservancies have real estate people working on commissions versus hourly? And Jack pointed out that the land trusts don't pay the commission. It's the seller who pays that.
That's
so
right.
So talk a little bit more about that. Like, how do you, so that involves that's not just a change in kind of land trust and how they think about it, but it's in terms of the seller. And how do you know, that's such an interesting, like, you know, in the work that we do, we can be changing our mindset, but the sellers, as you say, are just all across the board, right? Yeah. And like you said, they're all across the board. So it's very dependent. And sometimes it seems like a good idea for the sellers for us to really deconstruct that relationship, but and work for everybody. But as folks may know, that when an agent, like a licensed agent, is involved and working for both sides, that's called dual agency. And I've done it. I've done it well, and I've also had it not go so well. And so because of the current situation we're in, that's kind of why
sometimes the current real estate paradigm, we got to figure out how to have it work for us. And so I'm involved in a Native community project right now where I really need that seller to go ahead and hire a real estate agent and have that dimension of the legal relationships covered. And so in the model that we're working with LandBridge right now, the real hack is still on the side of the quote buyer, and that they don't have, that they can get service from a real estate professional without having to pay for it. So we're fundraising to be able, like with the Shelterwood group, they had a line item to pay for us. So we went ahead and just billed them monthly. We worked and we billed them, and their funders allowed that relationship to happen. A lot of folks who don't have a line item to hire real estate agents, so from the buyer's perspective, and so they would be dependent on us as a nonprofit to be able to step in and provide that service for them, and work as facilitators rather than as sales agents. And then when there is a commission, then it's held. Because we're forming the nonprofit, we're still sorting like how much gets flushed back to the buyers that didn't pay for any of it, how much keeps our coffers, like in a place where we can keep offering that to other groups. But right now, it can get really complicated when the sellers, I mean, I could talk about it for a very long time, actually, but right now.
Do share some of that, right? I mean, because I think that's partly the kind of unpacking of those relationships, right? And kind of understanding how we can rethink those.
Yeah. So there's in a few of the situations we've gotten ourselves involved with, there's a really mixed relationship amongst often with legacy land projects. There's a family, and they're kind of all over the place in terms of you got people who think that they should give the land to the Native community, and then you got people who are like, oh no, we got to sell this on the market for top dollar. And those they're all related in the same family. And so interfacing with that group of people can be very hard, for not just because the terms of the transition aren't clear, but because people say things that are like quite hurtful. And so having the buffering of, first I'm like, get all the agents out of here, let's just sit at the table and work it out. And now that I've like deeper into some of the more sensitive work, I'm like, oh, there's a great need for real estate agents in here to actually help. I have a colleague who's doing a project called Rightful Return, Cooper Freeman, and it's all about helping the mostly white landowner, wealth steward families that want to do land returns, do them well without causing further harm, because that unfortunately is a thing. And so, so I mean, there's the relationship layer of it, and then there's the money layer of it, and obviously they're related. But I know there's some questions brewing here and other comments, so I'm curious where to go with it.
Yeah, exactly. So Jack, tell me, I don't know this about you. Are you actually a real estate agent? But Jack, who's been in the land conservancy movement, land trust movement for a long time, and he says, when I broker a transaction, I take a different tactic. I rebate any commission received to the land conservancy. That's one way to take advantage of the commission structure. So I don't know if you want to, speak to that.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the things that we're thinking about is just basically within LandBridge having a commission fund that is revolving and is able to hire, to work with real estate folks, and then also be able to just replenish when a commission comes in through the nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so then Jack, be super interested as a broker, as you say, for 30 plus more years. And then as Judy said, there's a small comparison with the movement of lawyers handling death estates moving from percentages of estate to the hourly rate. So doing that, some here are calculating both and choosing the cheapest, right? So whichever way it goes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you want to kind of speak to that, right?
Well, I mean, there's a way of making sure that we're keeping costs down for the people that we're working for. Absolutely. But I think that I also want to uphold the fact that when you're working for a commission on a very long and complex land project, I started to feel extracted from as a person. Like I started to feel like as a mother and the primary earner of my family, that the amount of stress that I had to hold in my body to stay present and keep it all about my clients for months and months so that I could come upon a $50,000 commission that would change so much for my family's sense of security. But I'm supposed to actually not have that factor in as a need into the system, because, and it actually shouldn't. My security should not be factoring in as a need to a complex real estate transition. And yet, like, I'm human, so it does. And how could it not? And so I've just found that by lifting that all up and holding that up and saying to my clients over the years, this is how the setup works. And this is the pressures it puts on me. And this is the pressure it puts on you. And you as a buyer don't have to quote pay. You could go get a real estate agent to speculate on you as a buyer, their own financial well-being. And so I feel like there's it's a core distortion of the relationship field in that I'm like, let's just get to that, pop it up, put it all into a transparent set of relationships and try to come at this work from a place where that it doesn't, there's not so much speculation on each other or on the land or the possibility of money being made or let's uproot that speculation and work for what our common goals are.
Yeah. And Cassandra, one of the things when we first met and talking about this, just again, loving changing the language from a transaction to a transition, right? And the whole idea of ownership is so fascinating, right? I've always felt like, my little spot that I own is that I don't own it. I'm stewarding it for now. I'm stewarding it for the time that I'm here. In 100 years, I'm not going to be here. And so there is going to be a transition. And what are the stories that the land will tell about the time that I stewarded this? And so as you talk also about changing language from real estate transactions to land transitions, and then the same thing that when you make an offer, make an offering. And so Zach from Van Buren asked, can you speak a little bit more about what it means to make an offering? Like, how have you integrated that? What does that look like in practice? And what is that, the time or two that, and I've told you this, the first time when I bought my first house, I was like, what backwards language is this that's in this document? Like, I'm like, I'm not even going to go there. I'm going to go ahead and do this transaction, but like this really needs some attention. And so,
it does.
Yeah,
it does. Yeah,
Alex, thank you, Alex, not Zach.
It's been a really interesting process in my life to get to the place where, like, I am in this moment with you all, that I'm not kind of keeping that more spiritual aspect of a relationship with land as like some secondary back thing. It's like it's like really centering that. And
I can imagine in the real estate field, this is like out there, right?
Oh yeah, and I'm in Northern California where people are out there, and so I am like, and people appreciate that about me, but I also, I need to be able to interface with the real estate industry. I need to be able to deal with real estate agents. I have to have their respect, like I need to be able to walk in a lot of worlds. And so I kind of, for the land, feel like, to be brave and be transparent about it. So I have an offering practice that I do, that is that whether or not my client group that I'm working with is of that ilk, I have a practice of making offerings with plants that I grow and songs that I sing, and listenership, being in a deep listenership, and really noticing patterns. Like there's incredible things that happen that when you're tracking certain trees and plants, it's kind of like, yeah, maybe the overstory. I'm curious, like there's like, who's in charge here? You know, like we think we're in charge and we have all these smart ideas, and there's some really amazing patterns that when you're tracking, you're like, oh, you are also have a strong relationship with oak or mugwort or whatever it is. Like people are tracking these things. And I have also a lot of clients who are more and more really listening to that level too. And so I encourage them, and whether I'm involved or not, because sometimes we have a cultural difference, and so I'm respectful of their cultural journey with regard to land. And so it's not necessarily coming from me, but we're in conversation about that, and honoring their traditions, and whether or not I'm present or I'm not. So I have some clients that are like, it's hard for them to do that in the presence of some other folks, and sometimes especially white folks. And so I'm like, totally respect that. And let's also like be tracking that dimension of our relationship with the land.
Yeah. So then as we kind of continue to kind of unpack the narrative and the language around it, Mark offers this, like there's a trade-off of risk. So no concluded deal means no commission, but accumulated fees. As you stated, on retainer allows you to walk away from a deal that goes badly. So can you speak just a little bit to that?
Yeah. I think that's it's a calculated risk, and it's one that LandBridge will be, I'm very aware, in a position that we're going to need to be doing a strong relationship building. There's an organization that I'm coming into relationship with that goes ahead, and they are willing to take the risk to hire us. So they have a line item. So the organization is fundraised for a line item. On another project I'm working with, there's no way they have to raise so much money that I'm fundraising for land for my time to be able to serve them. And so it's just on a case-by-case basis, evaluating that risk and our solidity as an organization to be able to do the work sustainably over time. So we're gonna learn and about how to do this. But with having been a real estate agent for a long time, I also understand that risk, and I think that it's it's also a lot about relationship. So if one of the land projects that we're working on doesn't come through, but that organization and Native community is still on a land journey and we're with them, then we're building towards that. And there may or may not be a commission that fuels that fund, but it also may be a worthy, for folks out there. I'm getting feedback from funders that they're interested in folks like me and my team being able to support quote buyers on their journey, regardless of the risk that there may or may not be a commission to refund what they've paid.
Right, that makes sense. So then, for those of you interested, folks who are attending, I think of land transition transactions as something that those of us maybe not in the land trust or land conservancy movement, or maybe not in some of the parks pieces, that those are not transitions and transactions that we participate in more often. Right? It's not something. But so a couple of you, so you online who are part of this, speak a little bit to how this is relating to kind of some of the land transitions that you all are engaged in your work. And then Cassandra, can you say a little bit more about how this is, as we're talking about you're recreating the narrative and the language and the processes around this, how does this fit with anything larger? Are you seeing this, like we said, in terms of you needing to be in the real estate industry and being respected among your colleagues who are viewing this very much as transactions and commissions and making money and doing their work? Can you speak a little bit more to any kind of movement or relationship with the land that you've seen in this field or ways that it relates to other fields that you've seen?
Sure. I'm actually going to write a couple of things down. So one of the folks that the organizations I've been working with is doing a deep study, a national study on the land justice movement, like across the states. And when they interviewed me and I, shared with them what similar stuff I've been sharing with you all, I got a really strong feedback loop. And these are people who are surveying the field from the land justice angle, and equity and access, that they're just, that in the land transition transactions that they are seeing, that there's just not movement support on the level of holding the transitions. There's people who, it happens with the Sustainable Economies Law Center, like people just call, they're like, somebody wants to give their land away, or somebody wants to do a discount sale, or, who's there and who can help us. And there's it's a bit of a, I haven't wanted to use this phrase, but I just probably some cool systems theory word for it, like some chaos, this or that, but it's kind of like Wild West, like there's a lot of land like on the move that is needing the support of folks to help with the transitions and to hold, whether it's from the side of the title holders and or the side of the reuniters. There's need for transitional support. And so I've been getting a lot of feedback, like, yes, we need you out there, from people who are funding land transitions all over the nation. So I am getting feedback that we need real estate folks. It's kind of tricky because, I am not wanting to take blows at real estate agents. I'm a real estate agent. I know how hard it is to be a real estate agent. I'm not trying to criticize like the actual people. There's amazing folks who are doing real estate transactional work. I bow to them. I work with them. Wonderful. The industry is upholding. And so I do kind of want to like, kind of, blow the whistle, so to speak, from the inside of the real estate industry about how much it upholds. I perceive it as a colonial legacy. Like there's like that, to me, it's just an embodied, there's nothing inside of the real estate industry except for like as edges of philanthropy that address the deep issues with regard to land ownership and the history and, the disparity that we have. So that's a piece that I feel like is nascent. And a lot of people think that private property in the real estate industry are just like too big to move. Like that's like, no way, how are we going to change that? Like that's just like, that's inherently, it's all the way down. And I don't know. I think it's changing faster than we realize. I think it needs to change.
Exactly.
I think we have better ideas. I think that we can come up with other ways, and that we all are, probably all of us, doing it. And so I'm just doing it from my one corner of the earth as a real estate person, and as and I think the other piece that I would add is, there's a really strong rights of nature movement afoot, and that is also totally reframing, hopefully at the foundation, this whole idea of ownership and sort of like dominion over, where it's actually like, oh no, land, the rights of nature, the right to exist and to flourish, and that we're in partnership with that for our own, hopefully, wise survival. I don't feel like I need to convince any of you of that.
No, and I mean that's one of the reasons that I wanted to kind of bring you into this conversation, because I think that all of those of us online, many of us have been having conversations about how we rethink our relationships with the land, right? Mm-hmm. So that's clearly part of the stewardship work that we do. And then as you and I were having this conversation about doing it within this systemic change, as you said, that some people say it's too big to change, and it's like, no, we can change institutions, we can do that work. And so that's one of the reasons that I wanted to bring you as a real estate agent. Mind you, I did change your description from the very beginning. Started out with real estate agent, and I'm like, wait a minute, I think I want to soft pedal you in as a real estate agent, because that industry is one that we probably have our preconceptions about what it is, and so love that there are people within that industry like you who are rethinking that relationship and what that is.
Yeah.
So more on that for sure. But one of the questions that Mark asks also is that sounds like mostly you're working on a buyer side, right? So you're thinking about that transition and how those land transitions happen from a rematriation, as you say, bringing that back as a buyer. What do you even call that now? It's not a buyer, right?
I know, it's really clunky. I'm not satisfied with the word options we have so far. So let's
exactly. We'll rethink language. We'll continue to rethink language. But how do you connect with sellers on that?
Yeah, and that's really, in the orientation side that I have, we are working with on the land side in a large project right now that is really seeking a continuity, and yet really willing to release a lot of control. So on the side of the quote sellers or title holders, there's I think a really strong opportunity when those folks have the capacity. Like, some people need to sell and get their money, and they need to center the financial consideration as like one of the chief design aspects of the transition. They need the market value of or close to it. And so sometimes folks in that position can what they can offer is like sort of a first right of refusal. They're like, we'll sell it on the market in 6 months, and we'll give you time. We'll give you this 6 months to get it together to buy it from us. And so then in that sense, they're giving time and priority to certain justice-oriented groups. And then, and so that's helpful, sometimes, although it can create a lot of urgency, and there we have it. But then in other situations where this title holder doesn't have to center the maximum or a strong financial return from it, is then they can have LandBridge help facilitate a transition of into what is this land going to, and oftentimes that's a transition from private ownership into some form of trust, and whether that's a community land trust, maybe there's conservation or cultural easements involved, but there's a way that we can hold the land owner in a transition into another iteration of the and hopefully a more reparative part of the story of the land.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that makes sense, right? Again, transitions. So Judith asked a question about, have you worked with land conservation or preservation within the context of a township or county government? And so then if so, do you have any advice on how to build support for conservation or preservation, or kind of what those land transitions are?
Wow. I wish I could say that I had experience with that. I'm kind of reaching right now for something, relevant to share. I was just reading last night in the new Yes magazine issue, just really going, deeper into what's happening up in Humboldt County, and that whole with the Wiyot tribe. That's that's a really important story. But I'm sorry, I wish I had more to offer.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, as we think about kind of the mindset of the real estate industry as a whole, and then you think about local governments and kind of how do you begin to change kind of mindsets there, and just understanding how things change within governments within periods of time that are just so hard to imagine, and the work that we do. And one of the things that I will say is that the mindsets of local and township, municipal, township, city, village, county governments, I think that in terms of the work that has happened in many communities, and Judith, tell us geographically where you're tuning in from, because I think we can help make some connections for you about places where they really have, it has become a mindset and part of the DNA of the community to think about not only preservation and conservation, but also just stewardship and community engagement in connection with the land. So definitely part of that. And then somebody else asked a little bit about local zoning issues. And so again, sounds like not something that is part of this conversation here, or
I work with zoning all the time. that's one of the big pieces when we're looking at when we're evaluating land is what are the zoning regulations. And because in so many of these projects, there's a really creative use and a public service use that's wanting to be had. It's not just for the people that are living there or a small group. It's generally like wanting to open it up and serve. And so the zoning issues are significant. And one of the layers, I mean, there's just the basic like property evaluation with regard to a grandfathered use, which is usually one of our strongest ways to get things catalyzed quicker than having to apply for a conditional use permit. But there's all sorts of strategies there, and a couple of them that I'm really interested in have to do with legal and policy levels. The policy level with the county or city government, there's some great elected officials now that are like, how do we change policy to help land projects happen in a good way, whether it's accomplishing rural affordable housing or other forms of sustainable regenerative activities on the land. How do we help this happen? And so there's with zoning, I'm pretty curious about zoning overlays, how they can help, and for specific land use or title holding situations. And also, I'm also curious about the legal layer of it, if a particular, which can work well with the zoning overlays, like if a particular kind of stewardship organization has perpetually protected the land, then what could happen there with the land with regard to its zoning. So I don't know, hopefully that made sense to those.
Yeah, exactly.
On that stuff.
Yeah, and Laura points out that the Forest Service works with state, tribal, county, and cities to create community forests. So again, acquiring, Laura say more, but I think the program is one that acquires community forests that then can be part of public access. And so really allowing for that land to be part of the community as opposed to held privately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's great. So so again, so Judith is talking about, so she's on the Land Preservation Committee and in the township where she is. And again, that's where that change happens, right? And so and Mitch also points out that as part of the Land Conservancy that he works in, that the Community Forest Grant Program is a great program. So, for those of you out there who are looking at that, check it out and see if you don't know about it already. So Laura, thanks for sharing that with us. So Cassandra, as we kind of dial into the top of the hour, one of the things as you think about the work that you do, and what are the conversations that those of us who might not have access to a real estate agent like you, like what are the kind of dialogues that we might be able to have with the people that we interact with on a regular basis around these land transitions? And so how have you, what advice would you have for those of us out there in the world who don't have access to a Cassandra?
Thanks. Well, we are hopefully going to be building a training program and therefore a network. So hopefully there will be more folks in the real estate world who are able to do this. I think that through relationship, it's really, you can generally find, somebody who can do because it sounds like you all have like really complex land transitions that you're involved with because of the nature of the conservation. So often there's real estate folks who do specialize in an understanding of conservation easements or big land and all of the considerations with diligence that come up with big land that's different from smaller or urban to kind of track situations. So I think that a lot of those folks that have their hands like really deep in it also are open to working as consultants, and at least I've found, and sometimes have a consulting practice because they end up knowing so much about these really specific aspects of land, and it's whether it's how to pull financing together, how to deal with the zoning issues, what are the legal considerations, and then all the due diligence with regard to the investigation and really understanding what's happening there with environmental review, et cetera. I think that that some of those folks would, like maybe building a relationship in a way, saying, hey, I heard that there's some other ways that we might be able to do this, where you don't have to just work on a commission, but we could work together and hire you as a consultant. And would you be willing, and, when on that Shelterwood slide and story that I shared with you, I got paid $150 an hour. Like, that's a totally doable wage. And I still was able to credit them $34,000 at the end of the day. So like there's a job security for the real estate people who are willing to get paid hourly along the way, rather than wait for that big feast or famine cycle of a commission. So maybe appealing to their expertise and maybe their security to work in service in a way that's more, that's hopefully more grounded for them as well.
Yeah. Well, Cassandra, thank you for opening up our dialogue and conversation with everybody else online. And I want to thank you all online. The hour goes by quickly, and just really appreciate your time. Thank you for being here with us. As we wrap up, I want to, for those of you new to the Stewardship Network Monthly Webcast, know that we are here each and every second Wednesday of the month. So put it in your calendar as a recurring event to see if you're interested in the topic and want to pop in and join the conversation. A great chance for us to be together really across North America and beyond. I want to thank you all for being here with us, encourage you all to have a safe and healthy new year and transition to 2022. I'll look forward to being with you again in the new year. And then also check out the conference, right? Join us together in January. We're virtual, so you can tune in from everywhere. For those of you who joined last year, we ended up with a really successful, interactive, as people said, only you, the Stewardship Network, could make this be engaging and personal. And so we're looking forward to being with you again virtually on January 26th, 27th, and 28th in the Eastern time zones afternoon and the West Coast morning hours. So look forward to being with you all. Thank you again, Cassandra, so much for being with us and sharing. I'll look forward to us continuing our dialogue, and thank you all online for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all so much. Thanks for having me. Yeah, thank you for your good work too.
Yes, exactly. Thank you all for your good work. Thanks so much.